This year's theme is working together. Caribou is important to so many people, and so caribou conservation really is a shared responsibility.
And between all the amazing events that have been going on this week, we've been doing a number of interviews with Indigenous leaders from across the country to share their powerful stories and important messages beyond the conference.
Okay, we are rolling.
Great. Thank you so much for doing this with us. Just if you could just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your name, and you can start off by telling us what you brought with us.
Okay, my name is Earl Evans. I'm a Métis from the South Slave community of Fort Smith, and I'm a member of the NWT Métis Nation. And I'm also a chairman for the Caribou Management Board that represents the 4 provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Nunavut, and the Territories. And I've been the chairman there for 5-6 years and a board member for about 16 years. And that board's been one of the first caribou boards formed in 1982. It's been around for quite a while. The longest caribou board in existence today. And that board was formed because people seen a need at the time. In 1979, the territories had huge fires, and they seen what impact it was having on winter migration into the trees for food. That food source was decimated by the fires. So in 1982, this board was formed to address some of the problems the caribou were having at that time. And I'm an avid hunter, and I've been hunting since I was old enough to walk behind my dad dragging rabbits. And my dad at the time lived in along by Wood Buffalo Park in Fort Smith, and he had a wood camp, and there was 4 Chippewa families used to cut wood with him there. And when I was 8-9 years old, I used to go snare rabbits while my dad was cutting wood with these people, and I'd bring the rabbits to the old Chippewa ladies in camp, and they used to call me kachaze. Kachaze means rabbit soup. So when they'd see me coming, they'd say, "Here comes rabbit soup," because I was bringing them rabbits. So that's what they call me back home, kachaze, the Chippewa people. So yeah, I've lived and worked with all the Métis and all the different bands in our area for years. I've hunted and trapped with all those native people in that area, and I get along good with them, so I try to represent them the best I can whenever I go anywhere. So that's my goal anyway, is a good representation for all the people in our area that rely on caribou and food, wildlife for food.
Yeah, that's very important. So what did you bring to us today?
I brought this, it's an antler from a caribou, a brow tine. And this was carved by a friend of mine, Mike Labine. He's an artist out of Fort Smith. What it represents an old Inuit legend. A friend of mine, David Exani, is telling me the story about how long ago the caribou would come. And there'd be so many caribou that he said you could just scoop them up with your hands. There were so many, and that's the way they expressed themselves. But the elders always say, you always leave a hole. You always leave a hole in your hand so some of the caribou can pass through, and there'll always be caribou for the future. And that's the message from the Inuit people. But the Chippewa people also have a legend too. They say these caribou, when they come, they migrate. You got to let some go. And if you don't, you'll kill them all. So the same message applies. They say if caribou get pressured too much, they'll go into a hole in the ground. But that's just their way of saying they go someplace where nobody can find them. You try to there's a bull, you try to take the bulls and let the cows and calves go to a place where nobody can find them. So that's their legend, and they're quite similar actually. You know, they both mean the same thing. You have to leave some caribou in order for them to survive and prosper. And so these legends are probably a couple thousand years old. So dating back to that time, these people knew that already. You know, they were conservationists at the time in their mind thousands of years ago. They knew this, you know. So what's happened now is this sanctuary where these caribou used to go, it's shrinking. There's less and less places for caribou to go and hide. with all the modern conveniences we have, snowmobiles, airplanes, drones, all these different modern technologies now are making it harder and harder for the caribou to survive. So these places of refuge are getting fewer and fewer. So we, as Native people, as hunters, we have to realize this, and we have to respond to that. We know these caribou are in trouble, so we have to try to help out by using conservation methods, taking less for the people, taking none if we have to. We have to make that sacrifice in order for these herds to prosper and survive in the future. Because we have so many things against the caribou right now. Before, it was a natural cycle, 25, 30 years, some people say 60 years. Caribou move into areas, and there's thousands of caribou, so they eat a lot of food. So every year they keep moving a little further, a little further. Then all of a sudden, one year they won't even go there. They'll go somewhere completely different. And a lot of that is food related because the food isn't there. You can't say it is all food related, but a lot of times there's disturbance, there's aircraft, there's roads. There's always something that'll move those caribou away from where they naturally go. And once a road is put in, the caribou might cross that road for a year or two, and then all of a sudden they relate that road to hunting and hunting pressure, because they know when they cross that road there's going to be a lot of mortality, a lot of animals are going to be taken. So they seem to learn, and they stay away from roads, and they stay away from noise, they stay away from light. And so what's happening over the past probably 7 or 8 years, the caribou used to come into the trees in the wintertime. They'd come south into the boreal forest to fatten up and stuff, but now they're staying further up on the coast, up where there's nobody, where there's no roads, there's no noise, there's no nothing. And what's happening is it's so hard for them to get feed up there in the wintertime because they got to scratch on the side hills, windswept hills to try to get food and stuff. And I think some of that is why the numbers are going down, why they're declining, because they're not coming through winter in good body condition. When they go into the trees, they go back in the spring, they're nice and fat because they've been down in the trees. Like after the rut is over, in November, the rut's over, the bulls start splitting off from the main herd because there's a lot of wolves with the main herd. So those bulls split off in small groups, 200 or 300, and they'll get on a lake and they'll stay there all winter. And they just go feed and back on the lake. And that way they avoid the predators because they're not with the main herd, and then there's less energy spent because they're just going up in the bush and onto the lake to lay down to digest their food. So they fatten up over the winter. But there's less and less areas for these animals to go where they have that peace and quiet. And I think that's taken a toll on the body condition of the whole herd. Because if a female isn't fat, when the rut occurs, she will not have a calf. So, you get all these climate change and all these other factors factoring into the one big equation here, and it's resulting in a decline, we think. And we think we don't know all the answers. Nobody knows all the answers. Everybody has their own version of what's happening. But people like us that we're on the land, there's a lot of people that live out there, they know, they're the biologists, they're the smart people out on the land. They don't need books, they don't need school, because they live the land. They know what's happening. They have their version. So we gather all their information that they have there, and we put it together with Western science, and we try to come up with the best idea of what's happening and how we can combat the decline. That's all we can do, So caribou, you can talk all day on caribou and you'll never hear it all. Everybody's got their own version of how things go, But we see things and we think we got an idea of what's happening. But like I said, everybody has their own version, and we know the caribou are in decline, so everybody's working together as a cohesive unit to try to lessen the decline is all we can do. Some herds are doing good, like we have the porcupine herd. That's one of the herds that's prospering, but they have been staying away from the roads, away from development, because they're in the 1002 lands in Alaska. That's where they calve, and they're pretty sacred. That's real rugged mountainous country. Nobody can get at them. But in the fall, they come down, they hit the Dempster Highway. They did that a few times, and everybody shot them up pretty good on the Dempster Highway. Said, they learned to stay away from that. So they're staying more and more in Alaska. So I think that's what's helping that herd stay strong. But now that President Trump has opened up the 1002 lands for mineral oil development last week, that's going to have a very negative effect on that herd, I think. I think the porcupine herd is going to really feel the effects of that move. So I know a lot of people are protesting the move, rightly so, and hopefully it doesn't happen. But if it does, it's going to create quite a hardship on a porcupine herd.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I think this is right up your alley, just judging from your character and the way you're talking. And I don't know that much about it, but the impact of wolves, I mean, there's different reasons. I'm reading, the woodlands are getting cut down, predators can move faster, things like that. I'm not really sure, but wolf hunting isn't a thing anymore, or could you talk about the impact of wolves on caribou? If there is any at all, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of different views on wolf hunting with wolves. But what we do know, and I actually knew some of the guys that were actual wolf hunters. They're from my friend Louis Mercady is the chief of the Fond du Lac Band. Him and his father and family have lived on Rennie Lake since they were kids. His dad lived there since he's a kid. And that's on the main migration path of the couple of the herds that come through. And they used to take probably a couple hundred wolves a year. And also people from Saskatchewan. I know one of my cousin Jane Dragon's family lived out there, and they took 150, 200 wolves a year too. So you have a couple families taking 300 or 400 wolves out of the equation every year. That's going to amount to an increase no matter how you look at it, because wolves eat caribou, we know that. But I think it was early 2000s, the government charged some of these guys for hunting wolves because they said they were using baits and that. And so they cut those guys off from wolf hunting. And after that, it seemed like the herds really went down, So we had that stopgap measure there of those wolves being taken every year was no longer there. And we also had wolf hunters out of Fort Reliance. We have Roger Catlin, his famous wolf hunter on the East Arm, and plus we had a couple Americans staying at Whitefish Lake. They took a couple hundred wolves a year too out of there. And all those wolf hunters that were all along that tree line are all gone. So you take 600-700 wolves off the landscape, that's a lot of caribou that aren't going to be eaten. We got to look at that, we have a lot of biologists say that, well, wolves don't really affect caribou herds and all that, but, the proof's in the pudding. You take all those wolf hunters off the landscape, all of a sudden, there's nothing left, So
if you had to make a suggestion, I know there's many factors, right, industrialism and things like that, but about the wolves, if there was one suggestion you could make, what would that be? Like, what would you implement if it was your choice?
Well, they introduced a couple wolf incentive programs along the lines, but wolf hunting is hard work. I mean, you just don't kill a wolf and you get your money right there. It's a lot of hard skidooing, cold weather, looking, or some days you won't kill anything. Some days you'll kill 10. I know my friend Louis, he was out there for several weeks, hadn't seen anything, and one day he was on this island making a fire. All of a sudden he looked down the lake, thought it was caribou coming. 58 wolves in that pack. And him and his brother, between the two of them, they got 18 out of that pack. And he said the first 3 wolves were just covered in blood. He said they must have killed some caribou. But that just goes to show when you have a pack that size, they need food. They're going to be killing caribou. There's no two ways about it, eh? And so, that's what Louis says. He said, sometimes he said you'll pick up a trail of wolves, a pack of wolves, and there's some big packs out there, Guys say, oh, you never see a pack more than 7 or 8. Well, these guys see packs like he showed me the pictures, 18 wolves stretched out on the ground. I believe him. I hunted wolves when I was a kid in the park lots. And the most wolves we ever killed in one day was 9, and that's really rare. But to kill 18, you must have been 50 or 60, like he said, because when you hunt wolves, you chase them, they just scatter. They just go in every direction, so you got to follow each one to get them, eh? So I know wolf hunting is hard work, and government has produced an incentive for wolf hunters to bring in some of these wolves, and they'll get compensated for bringing them in, which is a start. I mean, if everybody did a little bit, it would really help, you know.
So how could you make that better? More incentive, or a certain season, or is there something that would make it more lucrative?
Well, yeah, wolves, you want to get them when their fur is prime, right? So the prime time is from December till March, and after March they start getting a little bit, some of them. The ones way up north stay pretty good. But at that time, get as many guys out that want to be in this program and bring wolves in. And I think that would really help. You know, that's a start anyway. The rest of the stuff, you know, some of it is food related, some of it is icing conditions. We're getting so much ice nowadays. You know, you'll get a foot of snow, and then you'll get a half an inch of ice on top of it, eh? And like sometimes in the fall, there's no snow and you'll get a rain. All the lichens, everything gets covered with ice. Well, that's really deadly for caribou if you don't get a snow. If you get a layer of snow 6 or 8 inches on top of that ice, the heat from the ground thaws all that ice, so that ice is no longer there. Then they can use the food, right? But if you get icing conditions without snow right away, the ground has a chance to freeze and is very deadly for caribou. And also when you get a layer of ice, those caribou have to dig through that ice to get to the food. And what they're finding is they're finding hoof rot in a lot of animals, because as they're digging through that ice, they cut their feet on rocks, and then they get infected. And then on the way back to the calving grounds, that one herd, there was 5,000 stragglers, and that one migration about 5 years ago, all those animals were limping. Their feet were cut, they got hoof rot, their feet are swollen up, and that's from being in places too that are wet in the summer. A lot of the muskegs and permafrost is thawing out up north, and these animals are more and more in wet conditions, and it softens their hoofs, and they get cuts in their hooves. And you're seeing more and more of this hoof rot, which you haven't seen in herds. We've seen it in herds before, but nothing in those numbers. You know, so you got all these negative impacts on this herd, and it's deadly. And you know, like sometimes, like say, disturbance, chopper traffic, and planes, that kind of stuff. Well, some of the herds around the mine, close to the mine, they seem to be immune to that. Because I was on a caribou study there one time for 3 or 4 days, and we're doing reaction. We'd land a chopper by a herd, and we'd write down all the reactions, what the caribous were doing. The ones close to the mine, the caribous just barely even noticed us there. Some of them got up, some even walked towards the chopper kind of thing. But I've been in choppers away from the mines where there's no way, they don't see these choppers and stuff every day, and they hear a chopper, and 10 minutes before that chopper comes, you'll see that caribou looking around. He knows, he can hear way better than you. All of a sudden, there comes a plane or a chopper. They heard it 10 minutes before you, and they listen another 10 minutes till they can't hear it, then they go back feeding. So that's a disturbance right there, 20 minutes of their feeding time, that if that chopper didn't come, they'd be feeding, right? And they'd be able to put on that much more fat. So there's so many little things, you have to look at everything to really see what's really happening. We don't really know what's happening. All we know is the herds are declining at an alarming rate, which is scary for a caribou hunter, you know?
Speaking.
Thanks. Sorry,
Oh,
I didn't
no,
mean
it's
to
okay.
derail that. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
No, you talk even before when you're talking about whether you're representing your organization or as a hunter. Do you find do you find it difficult to have kind of both those roles? Do you find them different, or do you think being a leader in the organization coincides with being a caribou hunter?
Well, I think it strengthens my position as a board chair to be a caribou hunter, because I know what's happening, and I know all about caribou hunting, and I know all the ins and outs of caribou hunting, and I can bring that to the table, and I can use that experience in my role as a chair of the caribou, because I hunt all over the territories. Wherever there's caribou, I go. If there's caribou up past Yellowknife, I'll jump in and go. If there's caribou up on the Barren Lands, I'll go. I did one trip, my son and I, 1,600 kilometers from Fort Smith. We drove 300 to Rez, and we drove 500 kilometers out to the Barrenlands. We killed caribou there and muskox, and 1,600 kilometers by the time we got home. But we got meat, you know. So myself as a hunter, I like to hunt. I like the land. I like traveling. I like just being out, even if we don't kill anything. It's just nice to be out there and see the country and see what's there. Just being free and out on land is just the most important thing. And a lot of Native people view that, you know, just being able to hunt, have that ability to go out and enjoy themselves, have a fire, make tea. That's all part of hunting. That's what we love to do, and that's our passion, and we don't want to lose that.
Definitely. That's amazing. So with the conference theme of working together, and I'm especially interested in I think you have a very interesting role in having that balance and that experience. So do you have any ideas or visions or suggestions of how you think we can work together for caribou conservation, and if you think hunters will play a large role in that?
Yeah, well, the theme of this conference is working together.
Yeah.
And I brought that up yesterday when they had the minister's address here and stuff, and the minister said that he wants to work for the good of the people and the good of the caribou and stuff. So I said, well, that's great, because we have some jurisdictions that I represent that their provinces can't even get those people to the table because there's not enough money to send their reps there. Well, they signed agreements with us. They signed on a dotted line, a contract with us saying we're going to give this much money to your organization so our reps can attend the meetings and give the input from the people on the land. Well, that's not happening. They're not fulfilling those agreements. You know, a contract is a binding agreement between two people saying you're both going to do this, and it's not happening. So we have to make that happen. We have to have that cooperation between the governments, the people, and everybody involved to make this work. I know I have guys that come to the table there, reps from Saskatchewan, Manitoba, all over, but they can't make it to the table to give their insight, what they're seeing on the land, what they're seeing about the caribou, because they don't have the $1,500 or $2,000 the government has to give to get them at the table. That's not right. This board was formed for the people, for the caribou. They're the ones that should be sitting there, you know. And this board consists of hunters and trappers, people that use the caribou, one government biologist from each province, and one rep from the federal government, you know. So they're there, but the key ingredients are missing, you know. You can't make a pie if you don't have the flour, right?
Yeah.
So that's the way I look at it. Everybody has to make every effort to make sure that people get to these meetings. And another big problem is fires, you know. People from Saskatchewan have been complaining about fires for years and years, and the same with us. Saskatchewan says there's a presentation about how valuable the logging industry and stuff is. Well, they have a let it burn policy in Saskatchewan where they say, well, the fire is too big, we just let it burn. Well, it's burning all the valuable timber, plus it's burning all the valuable winter range for these caribou. The winter range for these caribou is also the hunting grounds for these people. This is where these people live, their families live. This is their life, you know? And all of a sudden they go to their trapline in the fall and it's all burnt. Well, those people have nothing. They have nothing to live on, you know? That's their livelihood. They're all burnt. So what do? They go back and sit in the community all winter, wishing they can get out and hunt. They can't hunt caribou now because it's burnt. The fires destroyed all the land, you know? So they have to look at fires in a different light. I know you can't fight every fire on the landscape. Fire has its natural place. We all know that. But to a certain extent, you know, patchwork fire is fine. It's good. But not let the whole thing burn. There's got to be places where they can geographically look at something and say, we can stop this here. We're not going to spend that much money, but we still can stop this here while it's small. And they have to do that rather than just say, let it burn. I know guys, my friend Joe Martin, he's been there for years and years, and he always brings a fire issue up, you know, every time. And Joe's about 80 years old, but he's smart and he's tough and he's a good old bushman. I love him. Good guy. And first thing he gets on my case right away is about fires. I said, don't worry, Joe, we're working on it, you know. So we can only do so much, but we're trying. And everybody's trying. I know the government sometimes our priorities aren't all in the same place, but we have to look at the people, because caribou and people go hand in hand. There's no separating people from caribou. Caribou are people and people are caribou. Where people go, caribou go. Where caribou go, people go. So everybody lives off them, you know. When you go to a community when there's no caribou around, that community is just dead. There's no skidoos running around, nothing. But you go to a place where there's caribou close by, that community is just bustling. Guys are loading their sleighs, guys are coming back from hunting, people are making dry meat. Everything's happening, the world's alive. But without caribou, there's nothing. Everything's dead. Pretty sad. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all this, and some really amazing words were expressed today, so thank you. Are there any other last messages or anything else you'd like to say, just as we finish off?
Well, I'd just like to say that, you know, we're talking about working together in TK and Western Science. You combine both of those together, you're a strong unit, you know. One-on-one, they're not that, you know, nothing gets really done, but if you can bring those two together and use the knowledge that's on the ground and use the Western Science on the ground, we could be a strong, powerful team to help, you know, these caribou come back. So hopefully that's what we can see, you know. And also when we work together, we have to treat the people that have the TK knowledge as equal. You know, we're not servants to the biologist. You go pick this up, do this, do that kind of thing for me. You're working there as an equal. You're looking after that biologist's welfare as much as he is collecting his data, right? So you're both very important, and you have to be treated as equal. And don't nickel and dime the poor guys to death. If they have their own snowmobile and they got to rent, you pay them what it's worth. You know, they try to get your boats and skidoos and everything out there for nothing. These people had to pay for that with their own money. So if you got to rent a skidoo, you pay them what it's worth, you know. And that way, because a lot of people, that doesn't happen and their snowmobiles break down and next time they can't go out even for themselves. So we have to be paid equally and treated equally, and I think things will be great if we can do that.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I have one request, Earl.
Yes.
Actually, I'm going to get you to hold out the antler and show me. I just want to get some close-ups of
Yep.
it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was telling Mike Labine, he's a friend of mine. He's a carver. He sends snowshoes and stuff all over the world. And I was telling him about how this guy showed me how this hand actually worked, what it looked like. And this guy had a stone carving, a little small one. He showed me. So Mike, being the wise man he was, he went out and got this antler from a caribou. It's a antler from the front, and he carved this out. And he said, "How does this look, Earl? Does it look right?" And it shows, you know, it shows the bulls there and the cows and calves going, you know, into a sacred place and letting some pass. And these 4 fingers on here, this shows the direction a caribou will go. One thing they say is predictable about a caribou is he's unpredictable. You never know which way he's going to go. You know, this year he might go south. This year he might go east. He might go west. You never know where they're going to go or what they're going to do. You know, so that's what they say. The caribou fan out, and they go.
Excellent.
That's amazing. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Right on. You know, another thing I want to mention is sometimes you'll see callers. Maybe you should record this.
Oh, it's recording.
Oh, okay.
Yep, still rolling.
Okay. You'll see callers, and there'll be people be watching these callers. Okay, the migration started. They're coming into the tree lines. They've been going this way for 2 weeks. Then bang! All of a sudden, those caribou will make a 90-degree turn. What caused them to do that? So I asked the girls, "What do you think it is?" And well, I don't know. I said, "Well, it could be several things. Number one, it could be icing conditions where they can't, all of a sudden they can't get access food. They might, but another thing we noticed is overflow. Overflow is water under the ice on the lakes. They start coming south, and then we got a bunch of snow early, so that cracks the ice, and it brings the water up. So these caribou all migrate. All of a sudden they're walking in water, and they don't like the water because it starts freezing up on their feet, eh? So they turn and they keep going until they find a lake or somewhere where there's no ice, and then they'll continue again. And sometimes it's the wind. they like to travel into the wind, and all of a sudden we're getting lots of south winds, eh? So maybe that is. So I was telling them, if you could take that information you have there, that caller information, and see where those caribou turn. Go there, look at the conditions. Why those caribou? Is there ice? Is there water under that ice? Is there ice so they can't access their food? Look at the weather data. Did the wind switch all of a sudden in that area at that time? You can pick all that information up, you know, and then you can correlate that and see what's really happening on the land. You know, this is just my way of thinking, but you know, you got to think outside the box. So there's all these little things, and the people that are on the land, they know a lot of this. Like my friend Louis Murgady, he told me those caribou were all coming through. He said, and we got all that overflow on Rennie Lake. As soon as they hit that bang, they turned around and got out of there. Well, there you go. Maybe that's your answer right there. But these people on the land, they see that. They're the biologists, man. They're the smart people. You know, they live by that. They live and die by that. Every day they go out and travel. They have to know the ice, where they're going. They watch the weather. They watch everything, because that's their life depends on it. And they're the people that we really have to listen to.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Super.
Good. That was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
really, really